Hello and welcome to Make the Logo Bigger. My name is Brenton. This podcast is your gateway into the world of advertising production, crafted especially for those who are stepping in new, aiming to become producers, or simply eager to understand the inner workings of advertising and marketing. We're here to share insights and knowledge you've been looking for, with stories, tips, and real conversations from the pros. We're simplifying the process for everyone with a production curiosity. Whether you're just starting out or keen to explore the production side of ads, you've found the right place. Let's jump in. Today, we're stepping into the vibrant world of post-production with Leon and Haley McDonald, the dynamic duo leading 3P Studios, a full-service creative and post-production powerhouse. Caleb's career began unexpectedly in live events, where he gradually discovered his passion for VFX and post-production, ultimately becoming a creative director and VFX supervisor. Meanwhile, Haley's journey followed a more traditional route, fueled by an early love for film and television. Her career spans roles such as editor, motion designer, and compositor, evolving from small company gigs to a thriving freelance career. In this episode, we uncover the diverse paths that led them to where they are today, explore the complexities of the post-production process, and discuss what it takes to thrive in this demanding industry. Caleb and Haley offer their perspectives on various aspects, including the significance of mastering different roles within post, the balancing act required to meet tight deadlines, and how the industry is adapting to the digital age. Additionally, we break down key post-production terminology, providing valuable insights for production professionals who may not frequently engage this side of the industry. Join us as we delve into the world of post-production with Caleb Leon and Haley McDonald. Caleb, Haley, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to jump on and chat all things post-production. Really appreciate it. To kick it off, what I'll do is I'll just get a bit of background about both of you. Caleb, if you want to start, give us an idea of how you got into the world of post-production and where you got and how you got to your position at 3P today.
Yeah, I have a bit of a funny one. So I kind of fell into post-production. I have a long history of working in the industry, and it's been over 10 years now doing all sorts of things. But I actually started in live events, and as a part of that is a lot of sort of editing and camera and a bit of everything. I went to uni, and when I was there, I went in thinking that I wanted to be an editor, and I left thinking that I wanted to be a director. And it was a couple of years afterwards that a friend of mine was working for a post house, and they went, "Hey, I think you'd be a really good fit for this position." And I said, "No, thank you, I don't want it." And so cut to a lot of pestering and a bit of necessity from myself. I ended up taking a job, and I loved it. And because of my background in being on set and working in camera departments and events and that sort of environment, I fell into a position as a VFX assistant, which had me traveling around following a VFX supervisor on commercials, on TV shows, and being a conduit between post and production. And, you know, moving on from there, I think, you know, we cut ahead sort of 10 years later, and I now find myself as a creative director and a VFX supervisor here at 3P. So there's a few different post houses along the way, a few different roles, a lot of jobs, but that's the condensed version of going from not wanting to do post to being a partner in a post house.
Very nice. And what about yourself, Haley?
My journey started in uni. I always wanted to work in film and TV. My dad loved watching movies from the movie store, and I always had an interest in working in film and TV. But my journey took a different path. Back in the 90s, they didn't have film and TV at uni, where I grew up in Lismore, so I had to move to Brisbane, and I worked at Woolworths full-time for 3 years while I built up my portfolio to go to uni. And then when I went into uni, I did a Bachelor of Communications with the pathway to get into a film and TV degree. And then I was just really always interested in editing. I was always okay at that at uni, so I always ended up being the editor. And then when I left uni, I got a job working for Amart Furniture out in the Oxley store. I was out the back, and I used to make all of the retail ads out there, which was pretty hairy. It was back before CAD was even electronic. You used to have to get a piece of paper out and write by hand and send it off in as a fax. And we used to send all of the ads to air up to Channel 7 in a mail bag. So if you weren't ready by the time the postie came at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that was a massive problem. So if, that was very much the, the foundation for learning how to deal with copious amounts of stress in advertising. There was a few days where I had to beg the postie to wait around for 10 or 15 minutes. They were very nice. And then I worked for a few different places, and then sort of jumped around a bit, got interested in things like After Effects and Smoke and those types of software. So I've worn a lot of hats. I've been an editor, I've been a motion designer, I've been an animator, I've been a compositor at one stage, and then I went to work for a small business. And then after I had my first child, I came back to work, and after 6 months I was effectively made redundant. So then I just started off being a freelancer, and I just became a very busy freelancer, and 8 years later it's grown into 3-piece studio. And I'm very lucky to have met a lot of great people along the way that have helped me build this business to where it is today. And yeah, this is where we're at currently over here in Milton.
Awesome. So let's talk about 3P, and then let's talk about people within 3P, because I know, Haley, you mentioned different roles, compositor. Forgive me, there's a couple others that I missed. Do you just want to give us a quick rundown, either yourself or Caleb, about the post-production realm? And let's talk it in specifics to 3P. Who are the different people in there, and what do those roles entail?
So 3P as a studio is a full-service creative house and post-production studio. So we do post, we do digital, we do visual effects. And so full service means that we will take everything through from offline and ingest, editing. We'll take that all the way through to mastering and delivery. So we look at the sort of stages as, we have producers who will project manage and be the point of contact. And they really are the project managers on a job. We will then, receive footage, and we'll have our offline editors ingest that footage, begin the edit, assemble it, cut it, rough it, lock it. From there, it would move into our sound department, where they'll do sound design. It'll also move into our visual effects and motion department, where they might be doing any animated motion graphics, explainers, visual effects and compositing. That then moves through into color grade, where our colorists will then do pass, polish it up, take it out of log, put a look on it. And then it moves into online and mastering, where the final touches are put back on it. All of the bits and pieces are pulled together, sound, edit, grade, motion, and then from there, delivery and sending it out to stations or, digitals and wherever it goes now.
In that whole process, can you give me an idea about what is the most time intensive?
That's a good question. It changes on different projects, I think it's fair to say. I think that you have jobs that are going to be what we would call cut and color, in which case most of the time is really spent on the edit and building and crafting that. But then we will have jobs that are more visual effects or animation heavy. They might not have any footage, in which case then that would be the biggest part of it. I think generally speaking, it sits in one of those two categories. And that if we're talking broadly, because I think as a full service studio, we look at ourselves as plugging and playing and working with our partners and clients to work with whatever they need us to do. So sometimes that's the whole process, and sometimes that's parts of the process. So it changes every single job.
Okay, so let's talk about terminology in there as well within that whole process. So I know we've got ingest. You know, I'm just throwing a few titles: ingest, offline, online, grading, sound mixing, VFX, mastering, etc. Do you just want to give us a quick rundown of probably sound mixing? Probably makes sense, but the other stages, if you just want to give us a quick idea about what they are and what it actually entails.
So ingest would be very much just copying footage to the server, making proxies, so a low-res, efficient version of the footage. Offline is going to be what we would traditionally think of as the edit. If you are a offline editor, then that's pretty synonymous with an editor. Moving from there into animation motion graphics, that's your After Effects, that's your design, that's your 2D animation or otherwise on top. Visual effects is a broader department which covers everything from your 3D lighting, rendering, compositing, which would be pulling it all together and integrating it into the plates. Color grade, coloring is very much something that would sit in that sort of DaVinci Resolve space or base light, and you're going to have the big panels and you're going to be kind of crafting the look of it. And then online is the one that I think is probably the least common or used or understood outside of the industry. But online editing is sort of the final stage where you have someone operating a piece of software. It could be Premiere, it could be Flame, it could be Resolve, and you're going to be kind of pulling together all of the bits and pieces from the rest of the processes and making that final file with your final sound, your final vision, and any titles, credits, and you're kind of the last level of polish before it goes out the door.
Obviously, it's not the same person who does it through the whole process.
Yeah, that would be correct. I think that you traditionally have very specialist individuals for each stage of that process. I think that now more than ever, some of those lines get a little bit blurred, and I think it's worth seeing more people come through with resumes and otherwise that wear maybe a few different hats, and that there are still very distinct and unique stages. But I also think that it's not a bad thing to, be able to sort of jump between a few of those bits and pieces. As Haley said herself, she was an offline editor and dabbled in motion, and in that regard, wore a few different hats in the process that we outlined, which I think is necessary nowadays, especially if you're going to be a freelancer or are working in a studio, and the more you have to sort of bring to the table and offer, then the more exciting that can possibly be to work with.
I think it's the size of the company as well. Wouldn't you agree, Caleb? A lot of the smaller companies, there is an expectation, I think, almost that people that come on board have to have, or they would like to have, a few different skill sets. I mean, you look at an advertisement at the moment, and they'll be looking for an editor, but they'll want someone who can shoot, and they'll want someone who can do After Effects, and they'll want someone who can grade. And there's very much the expectation of, in the industry at the moment, of people needing or having to be a jack of all trades, which is great. I mean, I was a jack of all trades once, doing all of those roles, but I think 3P really, as a business, like to really work out with artists that come here what they really want to do and really where they want to be in the industry, and we like to support them to reach those goals.
And that obviously is advantageous as well to the business itself, of course, because if you can have people who can wear multiple hats, of course that makes sense.
There's a phrase that I heard used the other day that I really like, which is traditionally it's the jack of all trades, master of none. But I think that the way I heard it sort of flipped was jack of all trades, master of one. And I think that in that capacity, it sort of looked at it through this lens of going, well, the more schools of thought, the more areas of the industry, and the more departments that you can understand how and what they do and why they do it.
So let's throw a hypothetical to you, or not even hypothetical. are preferred? Let's say a 30-second TVC. It's live action and it's got some VFX in it. How long would you like? How long would a post house traditionally like to edit? One, the rushes into the offline. Two, to do the VFX. Three, to do the online. And four, to do the mastering.
We talk about this a little bit in terms of what's the benchmark for speed on something like this being match fit. What's the match fit expectation for something like this? Mm-hmm. I would say that if you've got a 30-second ad, I would expect 2 to 3 days to be able to cut that. I think that if that's all you're doing, and I think that's where maybe we can talk about what's the realistic versus that. But I think if someone said I've got a 30-second video, I'd think that I'd have something to watch at the end of 1.5 days. And then I think that the remaining time is really, how do we pull it apart, put it back together, change it, push it, and make it the best that it can be. I think that visual effects is a hard one. It's how long's a piece of string. But I think that if we're saying that, the VFX, let's say there's a couple of green screen shots in there, let's say that's the VFX, it makes it a little bit easier to sort of look at, then depending on the number of shots, you're looking at, some time to make the background. Maybe that's 3D, maybe that's 2D with the digital matte painting, but you're going to need, a couple of days to make that. You're then going to need a few days to pull the keys, composite it, polish it, add all of the niceties and subtleties of there. So you're looking at probably, depending on the number of shots, let's say there's 4 shots, and let's say it's one environment that we're putting someone in. You're probably looking at, a couple of days to build the environment and another couple to get your camera angles and render them out. And then you're probably looking at least a day per shot to put that together. So let's say 2 weeks maybe for VFX. For 30 seconds, I think, no more than a day for sound to polish that up and put that together. Grade, I'd say half day. You should be able to, but then sometimes we'll spend more time if we think that it's a more complex ask or look, so maybe a day maximum. And then online in that scenario, you might be putting a logo or otherwise on the end frame and maybe animating a URL coming up. So I'd think no more than a day. So for that, I'd say that, if you're looking at a medium to high quality 30-second commercial, a brand ad or something like that, you're probably looking at, no less than 3 weeks start to finish.
So what's the actual reality when it comes to the environment that we're in today?
Well, today we got asked to do one in 3 days, so really, Brenton.
If they're asking you to do it in 3 days, is it the fact that the agencies don't get it? Is it the fact that the client's just putting pressure on and the agency's telling them, yes, we can do that? Is there a lack of education?
I have 2 schools of thought on this one, and Haley can jump in, please. Because I think that on one hand, I think that sometimes if we get a brief, we always look at it as going, great, we want to give you the 12 out of 10, and that means time, to be able to polish and craft and do what we just talked about. And so sometimes our expectations are misaligned with what the client is asking for. Maybe what's important, what their look, style, feel, their reference is actually something that is more agile, or something that is a little bit, I'll say, more accessible or rough around the edges and isn't quite as polished, because that might be something that they're aiming for because that's what they want for socials, cut through or otherwise. So sometimes we would use the phrase jokingly, we overcook it, because we expect our expectations are not aligned with theirs. And so then when we kind of, the first thing I try to do is make sure that we understand that we are working towards the same end goal. And then let's say that they go, no, you're correct, we want this, but we need it in 3 days. Then I would go, okay, I think that means that there is maybe a lack of understanding on the scale or the scope of what they're asking. Mm-hmm. And I think that can sometimes also come from we're in a creator economy and otherwise, and I'd say that more people than ever know how to edit something, how to grade something, and you see a polished level of travel vlog that exceeds commercials of the mid 2000s. But I think that in that regard, I flip the question sometimes back and I go, well, if that's the level of quality that people are producing and turning that around and otherwise, how can we, if this is the schedule that the client wants, and we try to find some leeway, but how can we challenge ourselves to try to meet somewhere in the middle and push the level of quality we can achieve for the schedule? I think, don't get me wrong, I think that sometimes the first reaction is that when someone says, hey, 3 days, I probably go, sorry, say that one more time so that I make sure I understand. But there is a level of excitement in looking at it as a bit of a challenge and going, okay, well, 10 years ago it would have taken 3 weeks. Yeah. But is there anything that we can do now that allows us to achieve that same quality? Because that's the thing that can't really change, and do so on a shorter timeline. And is that a good thing, or do we lose something in that process?
Haley, let's bring you into this conversation about standout producers. Talk to me about a standout producer within post-production. What makes one?
I think a standout producer in post-production, especially the producers that I've worked with, and I've had some pretty amazing producers come through work in 3P. I've been very lucky. Someone who really understands the client, someone who isn't just a person who pushes around emails around a studio, has a deep understanding of what the client is asking for, and someone who can read in between those lines, I think is important. We work with a range of clients that come from agency land that are also, our producers will work with other very experienced producers, and it's very easy and they know what they want. But then we also work with a lot of people clients direct who sometimes don't know what they want. And a good producer, in my opinion, is someone who can work with those clients, be able to extract the right information out of them in order to assist the artists in our studio to reach what they're trying to achieve in that project. I always, like I said before, go back to, we at 3P don't just want producers who are here to act as traffic managers and push around jobs around the studio. We want producers that have a deep understanding of the tasks that they're being asked to do, and also the tasks that they're being asked to pass on to the artist. And they're very much the conduit between the client and the artist here, so they're able to reach the vision that the job needs.
For me, the biggest thing that I look for in a producer is somebody who reads between the lines and looks at not just sort of what is being asked, but also what isn't being asked, and sort of what's needed to get something done. Because I think, like Haley said, they're really the project managers and sort of in charge of that, and they're usually that point of contact to the client and otherwise. So I think there is an expectation from me that the producers know what the right questions to ask are, and aren't just there to pass things on and send emails and otherwise, but there is a understanding of, I guess, the process. And while they might not be editors and they might not be compositors and otherwise, the best producers that I've ever worked with understand all of the stages of the process and can explain it to anyone. And that level of understanding, I think, is what makes a great producer, to me at least.
What qualities do you think make a standout director in the post-production realm?
I've worked with a number of directors, and I think that there are no two that are the same. I think that it's fascinating to me, because I think that the role of a director is very different to a lot of different people. I think that some people look at a director as being all about working with actors and getting a performance, and then others look at it as the job of how do you shepherd through the purity of a creative vision from start to finish without it getting watered down along the way. So those are very different jobs and roles. And I think that if you look at it as a spectrum in that way, there are a lot of directors that excel at different things and maybe aren't as strong in other areas. I think that for post-production, I think that if you're a director who is maybe more focused in the creativity and the idea and performance and actors, then I think if that's the area that you excel at, then find yourself post-production collaborators, find yourself editors who will, challenge you and also pick the best performance and work with you on that, or find, a VFX supervisor who can interpret your crazy ideas and napkin diagrams into, actionable sort of things and throw references back at you. I think that sometimes I've had directors that think they have to kind of have the authoritative say on everything, and that sometimes harms projects. But then I also have directors who, are from the newer sort of generation where they've worked, they know After Effects, they've done VFX themselves, they've done the Video Copilot tutorials, and so they have a fundamental understanding of VFX. So if I'm having a conversation with someone like that, talking about how we'd approach it, it's going to be a very different language and a very different conversation where we're going to start talking technicals and, hey, how would we do this? And, oh, yeah, no, I understand it would look like this, or let's shoot it this way, or what if we try this? Which is going to be very different to somebody who goes, hey, I've never done VFX before, but I saw this thing and I think it could be cool. Can we do it? Like, I think that in that regard, maybe what I'm trying to say is admit what you don't know, but surround yourself with people who you trust to work with you to make those gaps, whatever they might be. I think that's maybe the most succinct way I can say it. I think that you often find directors, whether they be ads, films, or otherwise, work with the same people over and over again. And you'll see they often have their favorite editor. They'll have a VFX supervisor they get back in. They'll have a sound designer or composer that they love. And I think there's a reason for that. I think that when you find someone who you work with that you complement each other, then that's when some of the best stuff I've ever done kind of comes out of it.
So, Haley, for those people that are starting out careers in post-production teams, what advice would you give them, to help them thrive in the current fast-paced environment?
I think anyone who wants to go into post-production, a good start is to try and get yourself some work experience in some of the content companies and post-production companies that are around. I mean, that's always a great start. You can go to uni and you can learn lots of stuff, but nothing really beats real life experience working in companies. And that's what I particularly found when I started. It was a bit of a culture shock going from university to going to actually working in the real world. And I think, like Caleb touched on before, like learning the foundations of lots of different disciplines and being able to understand always made me a better editor. So I was a little bit like Caleb as well. Like I had a dream at uni, I was going to be the world's best director, and I had to understand cinematography and lighting and editing and sound and all of those things. I think at the end of the day is what made me a good editor. I could understand all those principles. So yeah, that's my advice, and just dabble in lots of different things, because the more you understand, the more it will make you a better artist in the end.
What do you look for in candidates when you're building a post-production team?
The three people that I remember the most that I have hired after kind of meeting them or otherwise. The first one is somebody who came and knocked on the building and the door and just showed up with a resume in hand and went, hey, I'm from the uni down the road, I'm looking for work experience. And as much as there was an initial reaction of like, well, this isn't a good time, you could have emailed or otherwise, it was a lasting thing of going, hang on, you actually put yourself out there, showed up, knocked on the door, shook my hand, handed me a piece of paper, and I absolutely remember you as a result. And we called them back and we got them in. I think secondly, I had someone who had reached out via email and they came in for work experience, and they didn't really have a CV or anything. It was very much, hey, can I do a week or 2 weeks of work experience as a part of my course? But they showed up and they went, hey, I looked at the company and I know that you guys do a lot of visual effects, and I looked at your reel and had looked me up. And so he was like, "Oh, I brought this along, and I thought, it might be useful." And he'd brought in a reel of VFX that he'd done in his own time, new course outside of uni, nothing to do with it. And I think the level of go-getter and passion, and I would say tenacity that demonstrated to me, I immediately left that, and I said to my bosses at the time at the studio, I was like, "Hey, this guy's only with us for a couple of weeks, but I think that we need to figure out if we can make a room for him, because that's a standout quality." There's a level of ability over experience that I value. I think if you show me the right attitude and you show me that you are willing to put in effort because you care, then I'm more excited and I'm more driven to match that and give you a go. If you ask for it, I'm going to give you a go, as opposed to if I'm looking and you happen to be in the right place at the right time. That's my experience, at least.
Yeah, no, I think attitude's everything. I mean, it's a massive cliche, but attitude over skill any day of the week, because you can teach people things and you can teach them skill, but you can't teach them to have a good attitude. So I think when we're hiring, when I've been hiring in the past, attitude for me is everything when choosing people to come on board.
Caleb, let me throw a couple of fancy names or terms that are used, and can you just give me a quick rundown about what they are? Flame.
Online software. It's a bit of an editor, bit of a VFX software. It's something that was built, dates all the way back to Jurassic Park and VFX kind of land. It's been around for a long time. It can do a lot of things. It's very uncommon for people to know it coming into the industry. I never knew what it was until I started working at a post house, and then I became a flame artist.
Rightio. Nuke.
Nuke, much more accessible, very, very good compositor. It is the industry standard. You can find a lot of things online, and I think if you came to me and said, "I want to do VFX," I would expect you to know your way around the software.
Houdini.
Houdini is elusive. Houdini is accessible. You can learn it. There's a free learning edition. We used to joke that you have to have a master's in physics to be able to get stuff out of it. It is a very procedural is the term that we use. It is a procedural VFX software. And if you love it, you really love it. And if you don't love it, you hate it. It's going to be the bane of your existence.
Maya.
3D modeling software, standard for most places around the world. It is getting rivaled a little bit by Blender now, because Blender's free and more accessible. So I'm finding more people know Blender than Maya when they walk out of uni or entry level positions. But Maya has been the industry standard for a long time.
Cinema 4D.
Cinema is a very, very good motion design software. It is 3D and sometimes overlaps with Maya and Blender. It has traditionally been very much for motion design first and foremost, can do really amazing things. I'm really interested to see what Cinema pivots as, because I think that it's having its turf challenged by the likes of Blender and Unreal and other more maybe I'm going to say innovative and sort of companies that are hustling a little bit more. But Cinema has done a lot of really great work and has been responsible for a lot of brilliant stuff in motion design and television.
Da Vinci.
World's best free editor. It's the industry standard color software, but because it's so accessible, it is very quickly kind of coming up on something like Premiere as a well-written and sort of modern editing software. So I recommend it to anyone who wants to get into editing as the best free editor on the market to cut your teeth on.
And the last one, Avid.
Avid is a beautiful piece of software that dates back to the transition from film into digital. And I think if you understand that when you're learning it, a lot of things make sense. A lot of the terminology about talking about bins and cuts and all of the tools kind of date back to a physical medium where you were splicing film, and Avid is built on that ideology. I think that Avid is something that I see a lot of editors nowadays not knowing how to use. So that's another one of those ones for me that if you walk in saying, I want to be an editor, and you go, I know how to use Resolve, Premiere, and I know how to use Avid, and you're not bullshitting me, then I'm probably inclined to give you a job.
I went for a job interview once and I didn't know how to learn. I didn't know how to use an Avid, and I was quickly found out by every time I went to drag and drop a clip onto the timeline. And then I became a very good Avid editor and I learned it very quickly. But yeah, it is a lot different to the Premiere, that's for sure.
Right, finishing up, team, is there anything else that you might not have known before you stepped into post-production that you wish you knew?
I think that I was surprised when I started working at a post house how many sub roles exist in a post studio. In a smaller studio, you're more likely to be wearing multiple hats and doing more of the process. But when you start to move into larger studios, and dare I say some of the global studios, the jobs themselves get more and more specific. And so when I started working at Post, I didn't know what a colorist did. That wasn't something until I shadowed one for a week. I had no idea what flame was until I started working there, and I got introduced, hey, this is a flame artist. And I watched what they did. I think that, the difference between a producer, a production coordinator, a production assistant, I think even those nuances aren't always things that you might know before you start working at a post house. I think that's okay. I think that, the more homework you do before you start, the more impressive you're going to look when you walk into a place and you go, oh yeah, no, I know what flame is. I know what this is. I'd love you to teach me. Or, oh, are you doing this? And that if you don't know, that's also okay, because I think that I never did when I walked into a place. I don't know about you, Haley. I don't know if you knew what flame was before you started working at a post house.
No, I mean, I came from working by myself for a client direct, working for small companies with 6 employees, all the way up to joining my first post house at 26 years old. That had 100 employees.
I think the exciting thing about that is that, the job that you might enjoy or that you might kind of find yourself eventually moving into might be a job that you don't actually know exists.
Where's the industry heading with the advancement of AI? How will it have an impact on the post-production industry?
I think AI will make things more efficient and should be embraced, not feared.
I think that AI is going to become another tool in the tool belt, but I also think that it means that mediocrity will be less accepted.
Haley, Caleb, thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate you squeezing this chat in your busy schedule. As I said, first time we've spoken to anyone regarding post-production, so I hope that a lot of people gain some insight. I know I have, particularly about what the actual names are and what they do. So thank you so much for giving us a great insight into the post-production world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that's it for today. I'll make the logo bigger. Thanks for hanging out with us. We've shared some insights and stories that I hope you found useful. Whether you're just getting started or diving deeper into ad production, there's always more to explore. Keep listening, stay curious, and we'll be back soon with some more from the world of production. Take care until then.